Welcome, everyone, to the Humotech podcast. Today, we're talking to Matt Yandell, Chief Innovation Officer at an awesome company based in Nashville, HeroWear. Tune in to learn more about how to build a successful exoskeleton product from idea in the lab to a rapidly scaling startup company. And now, Matt Yandell. Hello, Matt. How you doing?
Doing well, Josh. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining the podcast. I had the pleasure of trying your company, HeroWear's Exoskeletons recently, and I have to say I was very impressed. So exoskeleton or exosuit, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but how do you define the field in which you work?
I think it depends a lot on the audience that you're talking to. Generally speaking, exoskeleton has been adopted as the primary broad market term defining a body-worn assistive device. But exosuits as a subgenre, being devices that are more focused on having a majority of soft goods or a large number of software components, have been popping up in the market a lot more. So if it's speaking to an external audience, so a customer, I'm totally comfortable using exoskeleton to help bring up sort of the images they might be familiar with from the Marvel movies or some other popular media source. Then more internally, it's helpful to differentiate the difference between the two, because typically an exoskeleton is associated with a rigid device and exosuits associated with a soft device, but they're somewhat generic and not well-defined terms at the moment.
Makes sense to me. I look forward to the day where everything is standardized and we don't have to practice the conversation with this.
That'll be the day.
So I was wondering if you could rewind the tape a little bit for me, back to how you first got involved in this field and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, happy to do that. Dr. Matt Yandell, co-founder and chief innovation officer at HeroWear. I got into this field, would have been around 2009 if you go back to undergrad. And I've always wanted to build devices that help people. And through undergrad education at Iowa State, and then working for Caterpillar, really as a software engineer, I realized that there was a unique need to help people in a practical way, in a way that I could touch the user. So I noticed at a large company like Caterpillar, I enjoyed working there, but I didn't have any connection to the people that I was helping. So the products I was developing, this technology I was working on, I didn't see the impact on the end user. So I was there for a couple of years and decided I really wanted to do something more specific, more creative, that dove more into the depth of the science. That's where I started doing exoskeletons during my PhD at Vanderbilt. While I was there, my advisor was Dr. Carl Zellick, has quite the stature in this field, really great scientist, and learned a ton from him throughout my PhD. And towards the end of my graduate work, we had realized that some of the tech that we had developed to help assist the low back had the chops to be a true product in a true market. And from that, we decided to birth HeroWear. So we've been around in the last 4 years, so officially started in 2019. We started selling the Apex 1 in March of 2020, just in time for the pandemic, which was interesting for all of us, especially in body-worn physical assisted devices. And yeah, we just released the Apex 2 in March of this year. We've been growing the team a lot, so that's a super brief history of how I got here.
Thanks, Matt. I love to hear how people get involved in this field because of a passion to help human beings live happier, healthier lives. It's a common thread and a great one. I'm curious what you see as the primary gaps or blockers for progress in the field, and what you're doing to kind of build bridges to cross those gaps.
Sure. So for me, that's pretty easy, is that exoskeletons do everything that users and customers need the least, and that is assist them. So the research is really solid over the past couple of decades that you can use multiple different types of mechanical mechanisms powered, passive, elastic, either more of a metal spring or more rubber spring. There's like lots of different options, and you can easily assist the human body. The trouble is that in most jobs, more than half of what they do is not lifting or some other form of assistance. It's doing everything else. So basically, exoskeletons just aren't practical. That's one of the things that HeroWear really focuses on, to be able to design devices that are practical for everyday use and are consumable by the end user. We split that into basically 4 core disciplines. We have comfort, which is obvious. To be able to wear something has to be comfortable all the time. Assistance, which we've just covered. Usability, which is a key piece of the user experience. So how hard is it to take on and off? How easy is it to walk around it when you're not at work? How easy is it to change out parts and do maintenance? And the last bit, which overlaps with usability, is to the customer experience. So typically, we found the user and the customer are very different stakeholders. So the user being the person on the logistics floor, on the manufacturing floor, doing the work, has a different set of needs than the customer who's actually writing the check for the device. So that customer experience of how do you scale this from tens to hundreds to thousands, their needs lie more in how do you clean it? How do you easily size new people or change out suits between people? How do you make sure the cost is acceptable? Because, raising the price a couple $100 on exoskeleton seems low until you multiply it by 10,000. And then all of a sudden you start having millions in difference in the capital expenditures. So that's an example of kind of the different areas that we try to focus on our product development. I think the customer experience and the user experience and the usability side are the most neglected, and they're the most critical to scaling exoskeletons, which ultimately is what we want if we want to help the most people.
That's great. It seems like you guys at HeroWear really live it. When Carl Zelig visited our Humotech headquarters recently, he was wearing the Apex when he walked in, and I see you're wearing it right now. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how using the product yourself every day has made a difference for your company.
Sure. Yeah. We're firm believers that you shouldn't sell something you wouldn't wear yourself. So we wear all the time around here. And I think the best example I have for this is recently we had a team member of ours who was moving. So we took out 8 people and 8 exosuits because that's what they're for, and went and moved our colleague. What was interesting about that is it happened to be that day, it was 100 degrees out and super humid. So it was really a stress test of the system and ourselves. And to be honest, I was curious ahead of time how well it would work in that high heat scenario. Because, you design these things in air-conditioned buildings and you can't create heat out of nowhere, right? So being out there, we spent about 4 hours in the heat, moving everything you can imagine that's, in an apartment. And I came away more excited about exoskeletons than I had in the past. And that's because the Apex 2 really went above and beyond to do its job well. I didn't even really notice that it was there in the sense of extra heat anywhere. I didn't really want to take it off. I can't wear this anymore. It was assisting me through all my tasks, even more diverse tasks like stairs, ramps, things like that. Was able to navigate with using the system's functions to do those pieces of the move well. So I came away really enthusiastic about how well it performed. And that's an example of being able to integrate something in a really relatively harsh environment outdoors, that kind of weather, and you not want to get rid of it, is a huge win, right? And that's always been our goal at HeroWear, and we've done that since our inception. And giving that as an example, I'm just trying to highlight wearing it yourself is really critical. Using it in real scenarios is really critical. And seeing the benefit of being able to do a whole move and then sitting down at the restaurant and not feeling like just dead and ready to fall over, to me is quite the achievement.
That's awesome. I'm curious if you could snap your fingers and realize the next generation, maybe it's Apex 3, it can do something that the current version can't do. What would that be? What are you most excited about for the next level?
feels like a generic answer, but it's really not. And that's faster, lighter, smaller, better. I think exoskeleton technologies are a lot like cell phones in that regard. The newest one comes out, and at that time in 1982, or whatever year, whatever is your version of phone you're at, right? Or maybe it's the first iPhone. Be more apropos here. 2004, first iPhone, super shiny, amazing. Everyone wants it. If you compared it to an iPhone 5 years later, right, completely different device, far more optimized for its core use case. And that's where I see exoskeletons. Often, I think manufacturers get impatient and they put out a device and think it's just going to take over the world in its first version. And that's just not true. Any technology that's ever been developed. And so I think we're still in the early stages of what are truly optimized exoskeletons that are practical as a phone or a pair of shoes, right? Where they're not at that point yet. And I think I'm most excited to continue to do the things that aren't the cool science or aren't the flashy new features, but are more doing what we do best and doing it amazingly well, right? And that, again, goes back to making the customer experience can be modified or heavily influenced by really small factors. The webbing you choose to use for a connector, small bits of foam or plastic dirt in places causing discomfort. Like, the human body is really sensitive. And so those small details that you don't see that aren't going to be in the marketing claims are really what makes a huge difference in the end for the user. And so I'm most excited to keep diving in, keep getting better at what we already do, and make it so practical that people don't even think about it. It's the second nature is tying a pair of shoes.
That's great. I agree. I feel like our field is in a bit of a catch-22 as we talk about technological progress because, it's not possible to realize Iron Man suits today. There are all sorts of applications for exoskeleton technology that are relatively achievable, small technological leaps that just have not yet been realized.
Yeah, I would agree. Generalized technology only applies within a set of strict confines. So that's why I like the iPhone analogy, because it's like, how was it able to so quickly advance in this number of years in this format? Well, the Moore's Law existing was a huge piece of that. The ability to predefine everything in a nice rigid package was also super helpful for that. You didn't have to change the size of the phone to the size of the person, right? Fundamentally, that's what we're dealing with is anytime you add humans in the loop, right, things get complicated. And in our case, it's being able to be wearable on a human. And that's a whole different ballgame than how many different sizes of thumbs are there in the world? Quite a few, I would imagine, but still, they can all still operate in iPhone. Whereas not every person can fit into every exosuit. And so sizing people, giving them comfort, like it's basically, think of it this way, it's more akin to the clothing industry, right? There are just thousands of products for all these different applications, all very niche to your size. That's closer to what I think exoskeletons and exosuits are really going to be, as opposed to single do-all devices. Will we get there? Sure, eventually we'll get somewhere, but to be making things more commonized. But the full Iron Man, like, that could take quite a while, right? I think another way to look at it is cars are another pretty good example. They all have the same basic architecture, but they have vastly different applications and uses, price points, features for lots of different customers. And so all those things combined, I don't think it's reasonable to assume that we'll have a dual exoskeleton in 10 years or even 20 really that can do everything. But I think if we really focus our research dollars and our commercial dollars on devices that are really practical for true use cases that provide real societal value, then we're at a good spot.
I agree. I think it's funny, we find ourselves speaking in analogies a lot because the world has never really seen ubiquitous use of this exoskeleton technology. I like the iPhone story, but one piece of it that I struggle with as I think about the exoskeleton field is that there's something magical about using a smartphone where you get this like dopamine rush when you interact with it. It's just so fun and addictive. How do we bake that quality into exoskeletons?
Well, that's what we do with the Apex. So you just have to wear an Apex and you're there. I think there's a couple different elements to that. One is considering the audience that we're really going for. So the user groups, like I think that dopamine rush could be helpful, but they're trying to do their job and go home without breaking their back. And so I think they're much less concerned about the feeling of the dopamine rush as opposed to the broad market consumer, but they need to love it. That's why I like the tool analogy best in this situation. They want a tool that works really well. And when you have something that is just a pleasure to use, so it's towards that end of the spectrum of the dopamine rush, I think you get really good adoption. So like, whether it's a good power drill, a good pair of boots, like you're not getting a dopamine rush presumably from those products, but when you use them, you're delighted, right? You want to delight users. And I think, again, I keep circling back to it because it's so critical and undervalued in the industry right now. The user experience is everything. And for instance, a simple example of how quickly you can connect a buckle is a piece of the user experience. And it's a small thing, but you compile that across your suit and you could add up to a couple extra minutes of assembly time. That becomes a barrier, right? And so it literally goes down to the real small details and being excellent at the small things, which is one of our core competencies. And when you get the small things right, it's not necessarily the things you notice, it's the things you don't notice. It's that you don't notice you're wearing the exosuit. It's that you forget that you're wearing it. It's that you don't, I'm not uncomfortable anywhere. I was expecting to be uncomfortable. Like, to me, that's how you achieve good outcome.
That's great. And yeah, it's clear to me that you guys are doing a good job of getting the little things right. I think that needs to be the basis for any endeavor in exoskeleton technology. So I'm curious about what your day-to-day reality is like today at HeroWear. What does a chief innovation officer do? And what are you up to these days?
Yeah, wearing a lot of hats. So just launched the Apex 2. So I'm now knee deep in the next set of research projects. A lot of what we're doing right now is just growing our team. Had a lot of recs out recently. Just posted one last night. Our team is almost doubled last year. So things have been growing quite quickly. We've been doing really well. And yeah, I'm focused on building the team, building the right processes and systems to have a mature organization that scales well with our technology. And that's really what I'm up to. It's easy to forget in the midst of my favorite thing, which is new technology, right? It's easy to forget in the middle of that executing on it is just as much, if not more important, right? Because at some point you're a company and not just a product, and you have to be able to execute as a business and get things done. And so that's been a big focus for me recently, is making sure we're getting the right things done on pace, on budget, because I love the tech, but you can have the best technology in the world, and if there's not a viable business, it fails, right? And we've seen that across the decades with a lot of different technologies that might have been better than the iPhone or better than name your technology, but the poor execution meant they just died on the vine, right? And we're not going to do that. So it's getting up every day and finding ways to be better and setting up our organization to scale, be successful.
I love that commitment. What are some of the main challenges that you're running into? Doubling the size of any company is certainly a big challenge.
Sure. One of the interesting ones is carefully evaluating incoming technical personnel, because shocking as it might be, no one out there has built exoskeletons before. So, it's not so much a challenge. Like, you can't find anyone who's great at this. Like, we have an amazing team and continue to bring in amazing team members. It's more having a thorough evaluation process, even more so than your average job, because of the industry we work in. There's a huge measure of adaptability because no one's done this before. And so they have to be able to come in and adapt and learn new things. They can't just abide by a previously existing process. I think that's a key piece of it. I think it's educating the customers and the users as well. Like if you think about it from that perspective, most of the people who will eventually buy an Apex have never heard of an Apex. We're such a niche market where we live in that world, right? An assistive technology world. You know what this is like. So in our world, like it's very normal. I wear an exosuit at work. Like, that's just a thing that I do. Everyone that sees me wearing this on the street goes, what is that? Right? They've never seen it before. So that education of the customer base, I think, is one of the other big challenges. It definitely can be overcome. I'm just more stating that that's one of the things that if every customer in the US that knows what an iPhone is knew that we existed, what would happen to our sales? They would probably go up quite a bit, right? So helping the world understand these technologies are for real, that they're not a marketing spoof, that can actually be practical for their use case, I think is going to make a huge difference in being able to scale up the industry and make all the boats float higher.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that. And I'm glad to be talking to a fellow company that's also committed to uplifting the entire field, supporting the ecosystem. That's what this podcast is all about. You mentioned earlier hiring. So for our listeners who are looking for a job at an exoskeleton company, where should they go to find your postings?
Sure. It's on LinkedIn right now. If you just go to my profile on LinkedIn, Matthew Yandell at HeroWear, you can see that we're hiring and link you to the job, or just look in HeroWear's feed. There should be a link to the post as well.
Great. Check it out. So I'm curious about your kind of views on startup culture. You're working towards something big and exciting, and presumably working very hard and some long days. I'm curious how you manage work-life balance.
Sure. Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts here. I think no matter how you slice it, it's a challenge. You really have to recognize that you're building towards something in the future and growing something for the future, and that you're investing in that now, practicing delayed gratification. It's really the basics of anything else, whether that's finance is another good example where that applies heavily. Being able to have that long view is super critical. As it relates to, I guess there's two pieces of this, like work-life balance and then team culture, which are interrelated. But that's basically how I see work-life balance, is being able to know when to prioritize, or time when work almost takes over. But I recognize the value to the organization. Like, okay, this is going to make a massive difference in the future. This is going to help us expand and scale and grow and impact more people more quickly. And then you have, as a founder, though, that's, I think, an interesting way to look at it, is as a founder, I have an inherent amount more motivation because I was there from the inception to do the work. And then you bring in new team members, and they're not a founder, and this is a job, and they're excited about it. It's new technology, but they're not in it for the long haul necessarily. Maybe they have career goals where they want to move into another role later. Maybe they want to eventually move to a different geographic region and work for a different exoskeleton vendor. I don't know. There could be a lot of motivations there. And the way I start to handle that for them, it's just making sure they're valued, right? So they're going to probably work more hours than 40 a week. It's just the nature of startup life. But I make sure to take a lot of time to make sure that they know that they're valued. So whether that's a gift card here or there, taking them out to lunch, giving time off when it wasn't on their calendar, that's a huge piece of sharing their value. And then also sharing that with the team. When they do something amazing, you announce it to the team and do that on a regular basis. Someone once said it takes 5 compliments to undo one derogatory comment. And that's something to abide by, is making sure you're always lifting up your team. That and making sure that you share information across the organization, like what are the wins that are happening? What's going next with the company? Sharing the vision and the mission. We just had an all hands meeting yesterday. So the whole company in one spot, with the sole goal unifying us, like what's going on with the company, what's happening next. And it helps everyone see how they're contributing to the bigger picture. They're not a cog in the machine, right? They are a meaningful part of our team. And that sort of sports team analogy is very apropos, right? We're all in the starting line. We're all out in the field together, pulling towards a goal. And so being able to balance work hard, play hard, I think is a super efficient method, because just working less is it kind of move us forward, right? So the work-life balance becomes more about like flexibility and time off, or giving kudos, or a lot of other levers you can pull to make sure they feel valued and that they love their job. And I think that's going well at HeroWear. We recently had a person that we had put out an offer to, and they originally saw the job and didn't apply. And then one of my employees talked to them about it, like grabbed them for coffee because they happen to know them separately, and really like talked up HeroWear, said, "This is an amazing place to work. You should come work here." And they later told me in an interview, "Oh yeah, I talked to that person who's out on my team, and their countenance was changed," was their wording. Like they literally were a different person when they came to work at HeroWear as opposed to a big box corporation. And I think that speaks the most to our culture at HeroWear. People just love working here. And that doesn't come by accident. And it doesn't come because it's cool technology, right? You've heard horror stories of really large high-tech companies where they had really cool technology and everyone hated working there. So it's not the technology. It's not the charm of the founders or some other soft skill. It's really us creating an environment where people are free to make their own decisions, where they're free to be creative, pursue their passions, and unify that with a company mission that means something. And all that together creates a culture where people really want to work here.
That's great. That's really inspiring. I think all of it is so important, especially in an emerging field like the one we're in. To me, it makes me think of the concept of sustainability. And I try to be really intentional about the sustainability of kind of what I'm doing and building every day. I'm curious if you could speak to this from as it relates to financing your company.
Sure.
Of course, only say what you're comfortable saying, but I'm curious what your philosophy at HeroWear has been. And this is for all the other entrepreneurs who are listening that maybe have grappled with the many different ways of building a business.
Sure. Generally speaking, you get the funding that you need, not the funding that you think you want. And what I mean is, there's a real temptation in the sort of poster boy startup world, which is what I call like Facebook, Instagram, the unicorn. You hear these stories, and they're really interesting histories. Like I recommend the Acquired podcast if you want to listen to like the stories about startups. Really interesting stuff. After you listen to this, but they have these stories of people in their college dorms having an idea, raising hundreds of millions, and creating a massive company in like 5 years, right? That's like 1,000th of 1% of companies of all time. And so I think that story has tainted a lot of how founders see businesses and how they see startups. And I like to bring it to a more realistic tone and be like, you're building a business. Maybe you should say that more than building a startup. Because when you say building a business, it brings to mind more like the guy starting an auto repair shop or the guy starting food trucks right. We're kind of in the middle because like we're in a business that scales very differently than those kinds of businesses. But that mindset can be helpful because you need to recognize that it's got to be hard work. It's going to take a long time. And that even if you could raise the money, it's not always good, right? It bears reminding that when you take a lot of money from someone, particularly VCs, their expectations are in scale with the money that you take from them. So it is very possible to take a lot of funding and be worse off than if you didn't. And we've raised several rounds of funding, so I'm not opposed to it at all. of course. It's more stating there's some balance to knowing is there a direct purpose for the funding we're bringing in? How will it provide value to the organization? Who are you taking money from? How are they providing value to the organization? Oftentimes, that's more valuable than the individual, right? It's more valuable than the dollars themselves is the individual who's giving the dollars, right? Their ability to impact your business. So I think that's one thing to definitely stay read up on. I don't claim to be a finance expert, but I do know through my experiences raising funding, like that's something critical to consider. The second piece I would highlight is don't let the unicorn status also distract you from the state of our market in its unique position. And that is, as a nascent market, no individual manufacturer has ever gone to true scale before. And because of that, we're all learning the right way to do it. So I wouldn't recommend raising money early to go big and go fast, because you might not be able to capture the market anyway if the market's not prepared. So consider your market timing is what I'm communicating, which is another key piece of this. Is easy. It's easy to spend money that you can't get back, right? You raise a round, you spend all this money on marketing or whatever it is, and all of a sudden it's really hard to claw back that funding when you really need it. So to me, it's important to know the right time, and there is a right time to take the large VC dollars and blow it out of the water. But it's knowing what that timing is, and not assuming that you're going to get adoption as fast as you think you will, because again, every product takes time to get into the market, to be adopted, to have the grassroots growth that you need to really scale. And so sort of generic there, but really just the emphasis on thinking carefully about the reasons for what you're doing. Don't just get caught up in the hype of raising money being a startup.
I think there's something to be said too for being the sort of company that spins out of a university lab, where presumably the basis for the product and the company is scientific method and actual data suggesting that the technology is useful. I'm curious if you could elaborate on that and how you see that as compared to a wildly different field, like, taking pictures and sharing them with your friends on your phone.
Yeah. This is something that's really important to us at HeroWear. We have a really strong scientific foundation, and we are careful not to stray from that, because it's very easy, and we've seen cases in the exoskeleton field in particular where the truth has been stretched in an effort to have better marketing claims. We don't do that. We, of course, like every other organization, right? We try to show things as they are and show the true benefits for the user, but we're not going to stretch the truth just to make it sound better for you, right? We'll tell you exactly like it is. We'll point you to the papers where we found it or the tests that we did. I think that's super foundational. There's also, though, a pause point. So after you've gotten out of the lab and you have solid research, there is a point where you have to stop researching and build a company and build a true product. And the basic functional mechanism of HeroWear technology hasn't changed since 2017. Literally unchanged, right? Everything around it. So having an elastic mechanism, assist the low back, similar form factor, similar material, that hasn't changed in a long, long time. What has changed is everything around it, the structure of the company that's building it, the soft goods that are used to attach to the body, everything else, right? So assistance is easy, products are hard. So assisting the user with an exoskeleton is a really simple matter, relatively speaking. We alluded to this earlier. Making something practical is much harder. And so to me, I think that's what I would highlight on that balance is like respect science, build science, continue to do science. We partner with universities all the time. Continue to do research on our systems. Like we want to partner with them, make sure they have everything they need to be successful. And we want to hear if something's not going well with our tooth. We want to know so we can improve. We're not trying to bury things so people don't find out about them. But there is a point where you have to get out of the realm of science and go, what does a practical real world product mean? And we have to develop it with that lens. Because if you infinitely research, you never actually achieve a product status, and that's how you scale. It's how you impact more people.
Makes sense. You alluded to the early days, and that reminded me of when we first met, because your lab had acquired a Humotech system to use in research. Without sounding overly promotional, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the significance of that experience with the Humotech technology in all of this.
Yeah. Well, without Humotech, I wouldn't have graduated, so it's very significant to my personal life. Yeah. So Humotech became a really critical research tool for me personally, and across multiple others in the lab, which is the CREATE Center at Vanderbilt University, Center for Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology. And that's because it's, when you get into a lab environment, we're dealing with humans. Humans apply forces that are actually really high compared to what the layman thinks about, like several hundred pounds, right? That a human muscles can apply at various parts of the body. So when we're trying to do assistive technology, you very quickly realize that anything you're going to do that isn't a passive system is going to need something that's quite powerful. Because as researchers, we don't just want to pull on someone, right, in a very defined manner. That's actually what you do with the product. Like, a product filters down to a very specific application with this motor, this voltage to achieve this aim. And we need a much more broadband solution in the research environment. So I used it in particular for two things that relate to HeroWear. One is being able to understand how much force you can apply to a user with an exoskeleton interface without causing discomfort. And that's free online if you want to look it up. But being able to very specifically boil down to, this is the force profile I want to apply at this speed, and know the user is going to be safe, and to do it in a really easily controlled manner, that was game changing, right? It was basically plug and play. As soon as I got the Humotech system, plugged it in, started tapping it to people, and pretty quickly had it up and running. And so the key value add for me was, I consider myself a functional programmer and not a hardcore programmer. What I mean by that is, I want a really good library with predefined functions that have logical connections to each other that I can then write scripts and achieve my goals. So I want to be the doer, right? I don't really care what drivers are on the system. I don't really care what voltage is running through the motors. I really care about what is the force coming out of the system. And so Humotech, your work, Josh, made that super, super easy. Once you got trained on the system, it was very easy to convert it for multiple projects. So I did that. I worked on a biarticular prosthesis project, closed-loop force control. I use it to fatigue test some of our early Apex systems. And so it was a super flexible modular platform to be able to just apply force, like a super basic research need that if you don't have a mobile system that's fully flexible that works with you, like the modem cable system alone is one of the most critical features of that system. Like, there's a lot of, push rod, pneumatic cylinders, a lot of things like that. When they don't go through modem cables though, and they're not mobile, and you're in a human motion lab, it's nearly impossible to use those types of systems. So I found it really foundational to be able to, on the level of, to me, it's as important as having a force treadmill or an overhead gantry system or an EMG system. Like, it really transformed what I do as an exoskeleton designer to be able to simulate things that I could not simulate any other way.
I'm glad to hear it, Matt. I strive to make the foundational stuff easy. It's kind of the whole point of Humotech, because there are all of these much harder challenges to address out in the marketplace, out in the real world. And if we could speed up the early stage R&D, I hope to see a massive increase in the number of actually useful products that get commercialized. And HeroWear is just such an amazing story. I think we need hundreds of HeroWears solving all the various niche problems that our world is full of. There's no way one company is going to be able to have the assistance tool that is needed for every possible human mobility challenge. Curious if you can elaborate on this idea a little bit about focus. Clearly, HeroWear up until now has been very focused on a specific type of assistance for a specific kind of menu of tasks. But I imagine you're thinking broadly as well, and kind of growing strategically. How do you, I don't know, how do you see the future as it relates to not just one tool, but a toolbox full of tools?
Sure. I think it goes back to what we discussed earlier of knowing the market timing, understanding what each individual market really needs. So, in educating the market. So it's really what I'm saying is the fundamentals. It's not rocket science. It's not some secret sauce in the back room. It's really educating your customers, scaling your team, executing on your business. Because ultimately, as an engineer and a scientist by training, my first instinct is to go build the next cool thing, which by nature of startups is the very thing that could kill you, because you keep building really cool research projects that might work amazing in the lab, but then you have no funding to expand it out. You have no funding to take it to manufacturing. You have no marketing to spread to the world. And so in my mind, the best way to, propagate and build new product lines and grow your organization is to do what you already do really, really, really well, right? Execution always wins. The market always wins. So we forget that lesson and we're like, oh, let's build all these new things right now, spread ourselves too thin, not focus on the right things. And then the market wins, because the market always wins. And so are you saturating the market that you're in? Are you really growing the area that you're in? And I'm saying sort of more generic there because I obviously can't share HeroWear's product strategies, but it's encouraging the entrepreneur, if you're wondering how to kind of break in, be willing to pivot and be very flexible, but also but the thing is, sometimes that's easier than day in and day out doing the same thing really well and really growing and doubling down on what you're really good at and not giving that up, even if it feels like you're not growing like you want to. It's a lot like investing in the stock market, right? If when things are down, you immediately start selling and switching and going to something else, think you'll do better in this other place. There is a point at which that is very detrimental, where if you just stick it out, you'll see it grow. And in that sense, companies are very much like stocks. Stocks are literally companies. So the same thing, but that is a key principle to me, is being able to stick with the core stuff and do it day in and day out, do it with excellence and build a great team around it. That discipline that takes time to be really good at something, I think, is what companies should focus on, instead of trying to invent 15 things and trying to push them all at once.
That's great. Well, we have just a couple minutes here, Matt. I was thinking we could end on a call to action of some kind. What would you say to our audience?
Basically, delete your entire history of education and stop being a scientist and engineer and think about the person who's buying a pair of shoes, right? Who are you when you buy a pair of shoes? Make devices that are so stupidly practical that people could do it without an instruction manual. That's where exoskeletons have to go to really scale. It's to the customers, try Apex, because we think it'll be really helpful for your organization. But to the core listening group, which I assume is the entrepreneurship side of the house, really focus on the user and stop trying to be clever. I don't mean that in an insulting way, but we all like to be clever and have a neat, nifty thing or neat feature. Users don't really care about the neat feature if it's not helpful to them in their job. And so making products that really are fundamentally stupidly simple, I think is what the call to action is. It's not all about being fancy. It's about building a great business and doing it with an efficient and useful product, and not always having to have the fanfare associated with exoskeleton.
I love it. And if I want to try out a Apex Exoskeleton, what's the easiest way I can do that?
Sure. You can go onto our website and fill out the contact form. A member of our sales team will get a hold of you. We travel the country. We do demo days. We do a lot of different venues for people to be able to try on at Apex. But the fastest way is to fill out the contact form on our website.
Wonderful. You should do that. All right, everyone. Thank you. This is the end.
Thank you.